The sun was setting over Riverside Heights, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was the kind of evening where kids rode their bikes up and down the sidewalk, and families sat on their porches, waving to neighbors passing by. This wasn't a fancy neighborhood, but it was home. People knew each other here. They looked out for one another. Daniel Rivers lived in a small brick house on Cedar Avenue with his wife, Linda, and their 17-year-old daughter, Ashley. To anyone passing by, Daniel seemed like any other middle-aged man in the neighborhood. He was quiet, kept to himself mostly, and spent most of his free time working in his vegetable garden or fixing things around the house. His lawn was always neat and he never caused any trouble. What most people didn't know was that Daniel had spent 22 years in the Marines. He'd been a sniper, one of the best in his unit. He'd served in places he didn't like to talk about and seen things that still visited him in his dreams. But those days were behind him now. He'd retired 3 years ago, and all he wanted was a peaceful life with his family. He rarely mentioned his military service, even to his neighbors. It was a chapter of his life he'd closed. Linda taught 5th grade at the local elementary school and loved her job. She was the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday and organized block parties in the summer. Ashley was in her senior year of high school, captain of the debate team and dreaming about college. Their life was simple and good, exactly what Daniel had hoped for when he finally came home for good. But over the past few weeks, something had changed in Riverside Heights. It started small, the kind of things you might brush off as random incidents. Someone spray-painted ugly words on the Washington's mailbox. Mr. Chen found his car tires slashed one morning. The Johnsons discovered a threatening note tucked under their windshield wiper. At first, people tried to convince themselves it was just kids being stupid or isolated pranks. Daniel knew better. He'd spent too many years reading situations, looking for patterns, staying alive by paying attention to details others missed. These weren't random acts. Someone was watching the neighborhood. The incidents followed a pattern, starting on the outer streets and slowly moving inward. The timing was deliberate, always late at night when people were asleep. Whoever was doing this was building up to something bigger. He mentioned his concerns at a community meeting held at the local church. About 30 residents showed up, worried and frustrated. Mrs. Thompson, who'd lived on Maple Street for 40 years, stood up and shared that she'd seen unfamiliar trucks driving slowly through the neighborhood, the occupants staring at houses. Young Kevin Brown said he'd noticed the same car circling the block multiple times over the past week. The neighborhood association president, Robert Hayes, suggested they contact the police. Several people nodded in agreement. They'd already filed reports about the vandalism, but nothing had come of it. Officer Bradley, who responded to most calls in their area, seemed more annoyed than concerned. He'd told Mr. Chen that slashed tires were probably just bad luck, and the spray-painted slurs were unfortunate, but not enough to launch an investigation. Daniel stayed quiet during most of the meeting, sitting in the back row. But when Robert asked if anyone had suggestions for keeping the neighborhood safe, Daniel spoke up. His voice was calm and steady. "We should start a phone tree," he said. "If anyone sees something suspicious, they call the next person on the list and we all stay alert. Keep your doors locked. Install motion sensor lights if you can afford them. And if you see those trucks again, get the license plate numbers." People listened. There was something about the way Daniel spoke that made you pay attention. It wasn't that he was loud or forceful. It was the opposite. He spoke quietly, but every word carried weight. After the meeting, Linda squeezed his hand as they walked home. "You're worried," she said. It wasn't a question. Daniel nodded. "I've seen this before. Not here, but overseas. When people scout a target, they're planning something. They want to know when residents are home, which houses have dogs, where the weak points are. Should we leave? Maybe stay with my sister for a while." "No," Daniel's jaw tightened. "This is our home. These are our neighbors. We're not running." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the quiet street. Everything seemed peaceful, but he felt it in his gut. Something was coming. While Riverside Heights slept across town in a rundown warehouse, 15 men gathered around a folding table covered with a hand-drawn map of the neighborhood. Their leader, a man named Kyle Brennan, pointed at different streets with a marker. Kyle had been fired from his factory job 2 years ago and blamed everyone but himself. He'd found purpose in his anger, building a group of men who shared his hatred. They called themselves the Iron Patriots, though there was nothing patriotic about them. They were cowards hiding behind flags and symbols, looking for someone to blame for their failures. Kyle had convinced them that certain people didn't belong in their country, and that violence was the only way to take it back. Friday night, Kyle said, tapping the map. Most families will be home. We go in fast, hit multiple streets at once, and leave before anyone knows what happened. Bring bats, chains, whatever you got. Tommy, you and Chris handle the south end. Rick, you take the middle. I'll lead the main group down Cedar and Maple. A younger guy named Brandon, barely 20 years old, shifted uncomfortably. What if someone gets hurt? Like, seriously hurt? Kyle shot him a look. That's the point, kid. We're sending a message. They need to know they're not welcome here. Brandon didn't say anything else, but his stomach churned. He'd joined the group 6 months ago, angry and lost after dropping out of college. At first, it felt good to belong to something, to have friends who seemed to understand his frustration. But lately, the things Kyle talked about scared him. This wasn't just talk anymore. This was real. Back in Riverside Heights, Daniel spent Thursday evening in his garage. He opened a locked cabinet and took out his hunting rifle, the one he'd bought after retiring. He'd kept it clean and maintained more out of habit than necessity. He hadn't planned on ever needing it. Now he checked the mechanism, loaded ammunition, and set it carefully aside. Linda found him there. Daniel? He looked up at her, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. The soldier was still there, just beneath the surface. I hope I'm wrong, he said quietly. But if I'm not, I need to be ready. Not just for us. For all of them. He gestured toward the houses beyond their yard. The Washingtons have 3 kids. The Chens just had a baby. Old Mr. Patterson lives alone and can barely walk. If something happens, they need someone who knows what to do. Linda knelt beside him and took his hand. She knew arguing was pointless. This was who he was. Just promise me you'll be careful. Always. Friday arrived with clear skies and warm temperatures. Kids played basketball in driveways. Families made dinner plans. The neighborhood hummed with normal life, unaware that by nightfall everything would change. Daniel watched the street from his porch, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hand, and waited. Friday night settled over Riverside Heights like any other weekend evening. The Johnson family ordered pizza. The Washingtons were having a movie night with their 3 kids. Old Mr. Patterson sat in his recliner watching the news, his cat sleeping on his lap. Nobody knew that 15 trucks and motorcycles were heading their way, filled with men who had hate in their hearts and violence on their minds. It was just past 10 o'clock when Daniel heard the first sound. It was distant at first, like thunder rolling in from far away, but it wasn't thunder. It was engines. Lots of them. He was in his study reading a book when the rumble reached his ears. His whole body tensed. He knew that sound. It was the sound of something bad coming. He moved to the window and pulled back the curtain just slightly. Down on Oak Street, 3 blocks over, he could see headlights. Trucks were stopping in the middle of the road. Men were jumping out. Then he heard the first crash. Glass shattering. A woman screaming. Another crash, louder this time. Then he saw the flash of fire. Someone had thrown something that exploded into flames. Daniel's training kicked in instantly. Everything slowed down. His mind became clear and focused. He moved fast but deliberately, each action automatic. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911 as he headed for the stairs. 911, what's your emergency? This is Daniel Rivers, 847 Cedar Avenue in Riverside Heights. We're under attack. Multiple vehicles, armed men. They're destroying property and threatening residents. We need police here now. Sir, can you describe what you're seeing? At least 15 attackers moving street by street. They've got baseball bats, I can see chains, and they're throwing firebombs. They're heading toward the center of the neighborhood. How long until units arrive? There was a pause. Sir, we have multiple calls coming in. Units are responding, but the closest one is about 15 to 20 minutes out. There's a major accident on Highway 9 that has most of our available officers tied up. 20 minutes. Daniel's jaw clenched. 20 minutes was a lifetime. People could die in 20 minutes. Understood. Send them as fast as you can. He hung up and ran upstairs. Linda was already awake, sitting up in bed with fear in her eyes. She'd heard the sounds too. Daniel, what's happening? It's what I was worried about. They're here. I need you to get Ashley and go to the basement. Now grab the Washingtons if you can and anyone else on this street. Get them to our basement and lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or the police. Linda's hands were shaking, but she nodded. She'd been married to Daniel long enough to know that when he used that tone, you didn't argue. You just did what he said. She threw on her robe and ran to Ashley's room. Daniel went to his closet and opened the gun safe. His rifle was there, cleaned and ready. He loaded it with steady hands, muscle memory from thousands of hours of training taking over. He grabbed extra ammunition and his rangefinder. Then he moved to the upstairs guest room, the one with windows facing both Cedar Avenue and the intersection with Maple Street. He could hear them now getting closer. Men shouting, laughing, celebrating their destruction like it was a game. More glass breaking, car alarms going off. Someone was crying, begging them to stop. The sound of it made Daniel's blood run cold. He positioned himself at the window, staying back in the shadows where he wouldn't be visible. He raised the rifle and looked through the scope, scanning the street. His breathing slowed automatically, the way it always did before a shot. He counted the attackers he could see. 12, maybe 13. They were spreading out, moving in groups of 2 or 3. They weren't trained. They were sloppy, bunched together, making noise, backlit by the fires they'd started. Amateurs playing soldier. But amateurs with weapons could still kill innocent people. Daniel watched them move closer. He identified the leader quickly. A guy in his 30s, bigger than the others, giving hand signals, directing the groups. That was Kyle, though Daniel didn't know his name. He just knew the type. The kind of man who felt powerful only when he was hurting people weaker than himself. The attackers reached Maple Street, 1 block over from Cedar. Daniel could see the Washington's house from his position. Little Tommy Washington's bike was still lying in the front yard where he'd left it. Daniel had helped Tommy fix a flat tire just last week. The kid was 8 years old and wanted to be an astronaut. One of the attackers, a guy in a black jacket, pulled out a glass bottle with a rag stuffed in the top. A Molotov cocktail. He lit the rag with a lighter, the flame dancing in the darkness. He was aiming for the Washington's front porch. Daniel knew that once that bottle hit, the whole wooden porch would go up. The family might not get out in time. Daniel made his calculations in a split second. Wind speed negligible. Distance about 140 yards. Elevation minimal adjustment needed. The bottle was in the air. The attacker's arm pulled back to throw. Daniel exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, loud in the quiet night. The bullet hit the bottle while it was still in the attacker's hand. Just as he released it, the glass exploded and the burning liquid splashed back on him. He screamed and fell to the ground, flames spreading across his jacket. His friends rushed to help him, panicking, rolling him on the ground to put out the fire. The whole group froze. They looked around wildly, trying to figure out where the shot came from. They'd been so confident, so sure of themselves. Now they were scared. You could see it in the way they moved, ducking behind cars, looking over their shoulders. Kyle was shouting at them, trying to regain control. "Spread out! Find whoever shot at us. They're just trying to scare us." Daniel had already moved. He shifted to a different window, a different angle. He was tracking their movements through his scope, staying invisible in the darkness of his house. He picked his next target carefully. The lead truck, the one Kyle had arrived in, was parked in the middle of the intersection. Daniel aimed for the front tire, another shot. The tire exploded with a loud pop. The truck lurched to one side. Kyle spun around, fury on his face. He grabbed a baseball bat from one of his men and started walking toward the houses, trying to look brave. Daniel put the red laser dot from his sight right on Kyle's chest. The small red circle danced on Kyle's shirt right over his heart. Kyle looked down and saw it. His face went white. He dove behind a car, yelling for the others to take cover. "Who is this guy?" one of the attackers shouted. "I don't know, but he's got us zeroed in," another one answered. Daniel could hear sirens now, still distant but getting closer. Good. But they weren't here yet, and these men were still dangerous. He watched as several of them tried to regroup. They were angry now, embarrassed. Brandon, the young one who'd been having doubts, was crouched behind a mailbox looking terrified. 2 others were trying to flank around through backyards. Daniel fired again, the bullet kicking up concrete right at their feet. They jumped back like they'd been shocked. The message was clear. "I can hit you anywhere, anytime. You're only alive because I'm letting you live." Kyle was screaming now, his voice cracking. "Rush him! He can't shoot all of us!" But nobody moved. Nobody wanted to be first. They'd come here thinking they were the predators, the strong ones. Now they were the prey and they knew it. A few of the smarter ones were already backing away, hands up, dropping their weapons. Daniel's voice cut through the night, calm and commanding. Drop your weapons and lie face down in the street. Hands where I can see them. This is your only warning. Brandon didn't hesitate. He threw down his bat and dropped to the pavement, arms spread wide. 3 others followed his lead. But Kyle and about 6 loyal followers weren't giving up. They grabbed one of their wounded friends and dragged him behind a van, using it as cover. They were trapped now, couldn't go forward, couldn't retreat. Daniel kept his rifle trained on the van. He could take them out easily, but he didn't want to kill anyone. He just wanted to keep everyone safe until the police arrived. The sirens were getting louder now. Red and blue lights were visible in the distance, coming fast. Linda's voice called up from downstairs. "Daniel, are you okay? Stay in the basement." He called back. "Police are almost here." He could see neighbors peeking out from windows now, phones out, recording everything. Good. Let them record it. Let everyone see what these cowards really were. The fires they'd set were still burning, casting dancing shadows across the street. Smoke drifted through the air. In the distance, Daniel heard more sirens. Fire trucks this time. Kyle peeked out from behind the van, trying to see where Daniel was positioned. Daniel put the laser dot right on his forehead. Kyle ducked back down fast. They were trapped, and they knew it. Their big night of terror had turned into a disaster. Stopped by one man they'd never even considered might be in the neighborhood. One man who knew exactly what he was doing, who'd spent 2 decades learning how to protect people from men just like them. The first police car skidded around the corner, lights blazing, then another. Then 3 more. Help had finally arrived. The police cars came screaming down Cedar Avenue with lights flashing and sirens wailing. Lieutenant Rachel Martinez was the first out of her vehicle, gun drawn, assessing the scene with sharp eyes. She'd been a cop for 15 years and had seen plenty of crazy situations. But this was something else entirely. The street looked like a war zone. Several men were lying face down on the pavement with their hands spread out. A few others were huddled behind a van, trapped and clearly terrified. Broken glass littered the sidewalks. 2 cars were still burning. And somewhere in the darkness there was a shooter who'd managed to hold off a group of armed attackers all by himself. More units arrived within seconds. Officers spread out, securing the scene, checking on residents. Rachel grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Martinez. We need fire and rescue at Cedar and Maple. Multiple scenes. We also have an active armed resident who appears to be defending the neighborhood. I need to establish contact." One of the men on the ground, Brandon, was crying. "Don't shoot, please don't shoot. We surrender. Just don't let that guy kill us." Officer Thomas Webb moved in with his partner, quickly handcuffing the men who'd given up. "Who's the shooter? Where is he?" "I don't know, man. He's somewhere in one of these houses. He can see everything. He shot the bottle right out of Ricky's hand. He's like a ghost or something." Rachel's radio crackled. "Lieutenant Martinez, this is dispatch. We have the homeowner on the line who called in the attack. Daniel Rivers, 847 Cedar Avenue. He's former military, Marine Corps, Sniper Division, 22 years of service. He's the one who's been engaging the attackers." Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. A Marine sniper? That explained everything. The precision shots, the tactical awareness, the restraint. This wasn't some random homeowner with a hunting rifle. This was a trained professional who knew exactly what he was doing. She pulled out her megaphone and aimed it toward the houses. Her voice echoed through the night. "Daniel Rivers, this is Lieutenant Rachel Martinez with the police department. We're securing the scene. We appreciate your assistance in protecting your neighbors. We need you to make yourself visible and lower your weapon so we can coordinate." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the front door of a modest brick house opened. Daniel stepped out onto his porch, rifle pointed safely down, his hands clearly visible. He moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Every movement deliberate and controlled. Weapon on the ground. "Sir," Rachel called out. Daniel carefully set the rifle down on his porch and raised his hands. 2 officers approached him cautiously, but Rachel could see they had nothing to worry about. This man was no threat to them. He'd been protecting people, not attacking them. She walked up to the porch herself. Up close, Daniel looked tired but calm. There was something in his eyes, though. Something hard and sharp that came from seeing too much violence in his life. She recognized it. She'd seen it in other veterans. Mr. Rivers, I'm going to need you to give me a full report of what happened here. Yes, ma'am. Daniel's voice was steady. I called 911 at approximately 10:07 when I observed multiple hostile individuals entering the neighborhood with weapons and incendiary devices. I was told response time would be 15 to 20 minutes. I positioned myself with a defensive line of sight and engaged only when civilian lives were in immediate danger. 3 shots fired. 1 neutralized an active firebomb before it could reach a residence. 1 disabled a vehicle tire to prevent escape and regrouping. 1 was a warning shot to discourage flanking maneuvers. No shots were aimed at human targets with lethal intent. Rachel blinked. It was like reading a military after-action report. You had multiple opportunities to shoot these men. Yes, ma'am. But my objective was to protect my neighbors, not to kill anyone. Lethal force wasn't necessary once they understood they were outmatched. Behind them, paramedics were loading Ricky, the man who'd been burned when his own Molotov cocktail exploded, onto a stretcher. He'd have some serious burns, but he'd live. The other attackers were being lined up in handcuffs. Kyle was shouting about his rights, his face red with anger and humiliation. The others just looked defeated. Neighbors were starting to emerge from their homes now that police had secured the area. Mrs. Washington came out carrying her youngest daughter, tears streaming down her face. She saw the scorch marks on her porch, saw how close the fire had come. If that bottle had hit its target, her whole family could have been trapped inside. She walked straight up to Daniel. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then she threw her arms around him, sobbing. "You saved us. You saved my babies." Daniel awkwardly patted her shoulder, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "Just did what needed doing, Angela." Mr. Chen approached next, then old Mr. Patterson, moving slowly with his cane. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered. People Daniel had lived next to for 3 years. People he'd waved to and made small talk with, but never really opened up to. Now they were looking at him like he was some kind of hero. "I always wondered what you did before you retired," Mr. Chen said quietly. "You never talked about it." "Wasn't important," Daniel replied. "That was another life." "It's important tonight," Mr. Patterson said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Those men would have killed us. I'm 78 years old. I can barely walk. I couldn't have defended myself. You did it for me, for all of us." Linda appeared in the doorway with Ashley right behind her. Ashley ran to her father and hugged him tight. "Dad, that was incredible. You were like something out of a movie." "No, sweetie. Movies make it look exciting. This was just scary and necessary." He held his daughter close, grateful that she was safe. Rachel was on her radio, coordinating with her officers. They'd arrested 14 men total. 1 was in the ambulance headed to the hospital. The rest were being loaded into police vans. They'd found weapons everywhere. Bats, chains, 3 more Molotov cocktails that hadn't been used yet, and even a couple of handguns. This could have been so much worse. Detective James Cooper arrived on scene about 20 minutes later. He was with the gang task force and had been tracking the Iron Patriots for months. When he heard what happened, he drove straight over from his house, still in his weekend clothes. "Lieutenant Martinez, I need to talk to your shooter." Rachel led him to Daniel, who was sitting on his porch steps still answering questions. James introduced himself and sat down next to him. "Mr. Rivers, do you have any idea who these men are?" "No, sir. Never seen them before tonight. They're part of a hate group called the Iron Patriots. We've been building a case against them for 8 months. They've been linked to vandalism, intimidation, and threats across 3 counties. But we could never catch them in the act. Never had enough evidence to make arrests stick." James looked at the men being loaded into vans. "Until tonight. You just handed us everything we needed." "I wasn't trying to help your investigation," Daniel said flatly. "I was trying to keep my neighbors from getting hurt." "I understand that. But what you did here, it's bigger than you realize. These guys were planning more attacks. We found chat logs, plans, lists of other neighborhoods they were targeting. You didn't just stop one attack tonight. You stopped a whole campaign of terror. News vans were pulling up now, reporters jumping out with cameras and microphones. Rachel immediately moved to keep them back behind the police tape. The last thing Daniel needed was to be swarmed by media. But phones had already been recording. Neighbors had captured parts of the confrontation on video. Someone had filmed Daniel emerging from his house with his hands up, calm and professional. Another video showed the moment Mrs. Washington hugged him crying. By midnight, the videos were spreading across social media. The story was already forming its own narrative. Retired Marine sniper defends black neighborhood from hate group. Within hours, it would be trending nationally. Inside one of the police vans, Brandon sat with his head in his hands. He was the youngest of the group, and reality was hitting him hard. "What were we thinking?" he whispered to himself. "We could have killed people, kids, families. What was I thinking?" The officer driving the van glanced back at him. "You're thinking clearly now, son. That's what matters. Question is what you're going to do about it." Back at the scene, a fire truck was finishing up, making sure all the flames were completely out. The damage was significant, but it could have been catastrophic. A few cars were destroyed. Some windows were broken. The Washington's porch would need repairs, but everyone was alive. Every single person in Riverside Heights had survived the night. Daniel sat on his porch watching the organized chaos of the police investigation. Linda brought him a cup of coffee and sat beside him. They didn't say anything for a while. They just sat together holding hands, watching their quiet neighborhood slowly return to normal. "You know this changes everything, right?" Linda said softly. "Everyone's going to know now. About your past, about what you can do, I know," Daniel said. "But I'd do it again. Every time." Ashley came out and sat on the step below them. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell us?" "About being a sniper, about all of it?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Because I wanted to be your dad, not a soldier. I wanted to be Linda's husband, not a warrior. That part of my life, it was necessary, but it's not who I want to be. I just want to be a regular guy living a regular life." "You saved lives tonight," Ashley said. "That's not regular. That's extraordinary. Any decent person would have done the same." "But they couldn't have," Linda said gently. "That's the point. You had the skills to actually make a difference, and you used them to protect people. There's no shame in that." The sun would be up in a few hours, bringing a new day to Riverside Heights, a day when everything would be different. By Saturday morning, Daniel's face was everywhere. The videos from Riverside Heights had gone viral overnight. News channels were running the story on repeat. Marine veteran stops hate group attack scrolled across screens from coast to coast. Daniel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. News producers, reporters, podcasters, everyone wanted an interview. He ignored most of the calls. But when the local news anchor, Patricia Holmes, showed up at his door with just one cameraman, looking respectful and genuine, Linda convinced him to talk to her. Just once, just to set the record straight. They sat on his porch, the same porch where everything had happened just 12 hours earlier. Patricia kept her questions simple and direct. She didn't try to make it dramatic. She just let Daniel tell the story in his own words. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," Daniel said, looking directly at the camera. "I was trying to protect my family and my neighbors. That's it. Any decent person would have done the same thing if they had the ability to help." "But you have unique skills," Patricia said gently. "Your military training made the difference last night." "Maybe. But the real story here isn't about me. It's about hate. It's about a group of men who decided that their neighbors didn't deserve to live in peace. That's what people should be talking about. Not me, them. Why they thought this was okay. What we're going to do to make sure it never happens again." The interview lasted 15 minutes. Daniel refused to answer questions about his specific military service or his confirmed count as a sniper. "That's not relevant, and it's not something I'm proud of or ashamed of. It was my job, I did it. Now I have a different job, being a good neighbor and a good father." When Patricia asked him what he wanted people to know, Daniel paused for a long moment. "I want people to know that Riverside Heights is a community. We look out for each other here. We're different colors, different backgrounds, different beliefs, but we're neighbors. We're friends. And when someone tries to tear that apart with violence and hate, we stand together." That's the story. The interview aired that afternoon and was shared millions of times. People responded to Daniel's quiet dignity, his reluctance to take credit, his focus on community over individual heroism. Comments flooded in from veterans who understood what he'd been through, from other neighborhoods who'd experienced similar threats, from people who were just inspired by seeing someone stand up for what was right. But while the public was celebrating Daniel, something much more serious was happening downtown at the federal courthouse. The FBI had gotten involved within hours of the attack. Special Agent Victoria Chen and her team had been investigating extremist groups for years, and the Iron Patriots had been on their radar. When they searched Kyle's apartment, they found his computer filled with evidence, manifestos about racial purity, chat logs with other hate groups across the country, plans for future attacks on synagogues, mosques, and community centers, lists of targets, bomb-making research. This wasn't just a random act of violence. This was organized domestic terrorism. Kyle and his crew were being held without bail. The charges kept piling up. Arson, assault with a deadly weapon, hate crimes, conspiracy to commit terrorism, attempted murder. Federal prosecutors were building a case that would put most of them away for decades. Brandon, the youngest member of the group, was in a different situation. He'd surrendered first. He'd cooperated immediately. And now, sitting in an interrogation room with his public defender, he was making a choice that would define the rest of his life. "I'll tell you everything," he said to Agent Chen. His hands were shaking. "Everything. Who recruited me, how the group operates, what other attacks they were planning. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to make this right." "Why?" Agent Chen asked. "Why are you cooperating when the others aren't?" Brandon's eyes filled with tears. "Because I saw that little kid's bike in the yard. The house we were going to burn. There was a kid's bike just lying there in the grass, and I thought, what am I doing? Some kid lives there. Some kid who did nothing wrong except live in a house that Kyle decided he didn't like, and we were going to burn it down. We could have killed that kid." He put his head in his hands. "I can't believe I almost did that. I can't believe I was that person." Agent Chen slid a box of tissues across the table. "You're 20 years old, Brandon. You made terrible choices, and you're going to face consequences for that. But you're also making the right choice now. That matters. Will I go to prison? Probably. But it'll be years instead of decades if you cooperate fully. And when you get out, you'll still have a life ahead of you. A chance to be better than you were." Brandon nodded slowly. Over the next 6 hours, he told them everything. The information he provided helped the FBI identify and arrest members of 3 other extremist cells in neighboring states. His testimony would become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Back in Riverside Heights, the neighborhood was dealing with its own aftermath. On Sunday, the community organized a cleanup day. Dozens of volunteers showed up with tools, paint, and supplies. They repaired broken windows, cleaned up glass, and helped the Washingtons rebuild their damaged porch. Daniel was out there with everyone else, wearing old jeans and a work shirt, hammering nails alongside Mr. Chen and young Tommy Washington's father, David. Nobody treated him like a celebrity. They treated him like a neighbor, which was exactly what he wanted. "My son keeps asking about you," David said as they worked. "He wants to know if you're like Captain America or something." Daniel laughed. "Tell Tommy I'm just a guy who knows how to use a hammer and happened to be in the right place at the right time. He's 8. He's going to make you into a superhero whether you like it or not." "Great," Daniel said, but he was smiling. Linda and Ashley were across the street helping Mrs. Patterson plant new flowers in her garden. The elderly woman's flower bed had been trampled during the attack and she'd been heartbroken. Now she was supervising the replanting with specific instructions about spacing and depth. And Linda and Ashley followed her directions with patience and care. The news crews had mostly left, but a few reporters still lingered at the edges of the neighborhood, hoping for another interview. The residents had formed an unofficial blockade, politely but firmly turning them away. Riverside Heights would talk when they were ready, not when cameras demanded it. Robert Hayes, the neighborhood association president, called a meeting for Monday evening. Nearly every household sent someone. The church basement was packed. Robert stood at the front, looking out at faces he'd known for years. "I think we all learned something this week," he said. "We learned that the world can be a dangerous place. We learned that there are people out there who hate us just for existing, but we also learned that we're stronger than we knew. We learned that we have neighbors who will stand up for us. And we learned that this community, this neighborhood we've built together, is worth defending." There was a long round of applause. Then Robert got down to business. They formed a real neighborhood watch program. Daniel, despite his protests, agreed to help train volunteers in basic safety awareness and emergency response. No weapons, he insisted. Just eyes and ears and common sense and a good phone tree. They installed better street lighting. They organized regular community gatherings so neighbors would know each other better. They created a fund to help anyone who'd lost property in the attack. They turned their fear and anger into something productive and positive. At the end of the meeting, Mrs. Washington stood up. "I want to say something," she announced. Everyone got quiet. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 12 years. I've always felt safe here, but Friday night, I thought my family was going to die. I thought I was going to watch my children burn." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "Daniel saved us. He saved my babies, but he wasn't the only hero that night. Linda took people into her basement and kept them calm. Mr. Chen called everyone on the phone tree. Mrs. Patterson kept my kids distracted with stories so they wouldn't be so scared. We all protected each other. That's what community means." She looked directly at Daniel. "You taught us something important. You taught us that one person can make a difference, but you also taught us that we're all responsible for each other. Thank you for that." Daniel nodded, uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding that she needed to say it. "Thank you, Angela." The week that followed was a blur of legal proceedings. Kyle and 11 others were indicted on federal charges. Their court appearances made national news. Prosecutors laid out the evidence piece by piece. The plans for future attacks, the hate-filled manifestos, the weapons stockpiles they'd found. The jury selection alone would take weeks. Brandon took a plea deal. 5 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation and mandatory participation in a de-radicalization program. He would testify against the others. His lawyer told him he was lucky. He was. He knew it. On the following Saturday, exactly 1 week after the attack, Daniel was in his garden pulling weeds when a car he didn't recognize pulled up. A young man got out, nervous, looking around like he wasn't sure he should be there. It was Brandon. He'd been released on bond specifically to cooperate with investigators. He walked slowly up to Daniel's fence, keeping his distance, hands visible. "Mr. Rivers, I'm Brandon. I was one of the guys who attacked your neighborhood." Daniel stood up slowly, studying him. Up close, Brandon looked even younger than his 20 years. He looked lost and scared and ashamed. "I know I have no right to be here," Brandon continued, his voice shaking. "But I needed to say I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know how I let myself get so twisted up that I thought hurting innocent people was okay. I needed you to know that I'm sorry, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better than I was that night." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened his gate. "You want some coffee?" Brandon stood at the gate, stunned. He'd expected anger, maybe even a door slammed in his face. He wouldn't have blamed Daniel for calling the police or telling him to get lost. Instead, the man was offering him coffee. Like they were neighbors, like Brandon hadn't been part of a group that tried to burn down this community. "I don't understand," Brandon said quietly. "Why would you want to talk to me?" Daniel leaned against the fence post, considering his words carefully. "Because a week ago, you were my enemy. You came here to hurt people I care about. But you stopped. You surrendered. You're cooperating with the law. You're taking responsibility. That takes more courage than what you did before." He paused. "Come on, coffee's getting cold." They sat on Daniel's back porch, away from the street where neighbors might see and judge. Linda brought out 2 mugs and some cookies, giving Brandon a long, measuring look before going back inside. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she trusted Daniel's judgment. For a while, they just sat in silence. Then Brandon started talking. He told Daniel everything. How he'd dropped out of college after his father died. How he'd felt lost and angry, looking for someone to blame. How Kyle had found him online, in a forum for frustrated young men, and slowly pulled him into the group with talk of brotherhood and purpose and taking back control. At first, it felt good, Brandon admitted. Having friends who understood what I was going through. Having something to believe in. But then the talk got darker. More violent. And I just went along with it because I was afraid of being alone again. I was more afraid of losing the only friends I had than I was of becoming a monster. He looked at his hands. That's not an excuse. I'm just trying to explain how it happened. Daniel listened without interrupting. He'd seen this before in different forms, in different places. Young men who felt left behind by the world, searching for meaning in all the wrong places. It didn't excuse what they'd done, but it helped explain it. "What are you going to do now?" Daniel asked. "I'm going to prison. 5 years probably. My lawyer says maybe less with good behavior, but I deserve every day of it. After that, I don't know. Nobody's going to want to hire someone with my record. I'll be a convicted domestic terrorist for the rest of my life." "You'll be a convicted domestic terrorist who changed," Daniel corrected. That's different. Not everyone gets a second chance, but you're getting one. The question is what you're going to do with it. Brandon looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Do you think people can really change after doing something this bad? Daniel thought about his own past, the things he'd done in war, the people he'd killed in the name of duty, the nightmares that still woke him up some nights. I think people can choose to be better than they were. Every single day you get to make that choice. Some days you'll fail, but you keep trying. That's what redemption looks like. It's not one big moment. It's 1,000 small choices to do the right thing even when it's hard. They talked for over an hour. When Brandon finally left, he looked different. Still scared, still ashamed, but maybe with a small seed of hope that his life wasn't completely over. Daniel watched him drive away and hoped the kid would make it. Some did. Some didn't. But at least now he had a chance. 3 months later, the trial began. It dominated local news for weeks. Kyle and the other Iron Patriots leaders refused to show remorse. They spouted their hateful ideology in the courtroom, trying to use the trial as a platform. The judge shut them down repeatedly. The evidence was overwhelming. Videos, chat logs, witness testimony, and Brandon's detailed cooperation painted a picture of a planned campaign of terror. Daniel had to testify. He wore his only suit and answered every question with calm precision. The defense attorney tried to make him look like some kind of vigilante, someone who'd been looking for an excuse to use his military training. It didn't work. The jury could see clearly that Daniel had protected his neighbors using the minimum force necessary. Nobody had died. Nobody had even been seriously injured except for injuries the attackers inflicted on themselves. When the verdicts came back, they were unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Kyle got 35 years. The others got between 15 and 25 years each. Brandon, who'd already taken his plea deal, got 5 years as promised. The judge told him directly, "You have a chance to turn your life around, Mr. Connor. Don't waste it." Riverside Heights celebrated quietly. There was relief but no joy in seeing young men sent to prison for most of their lives. It was just necessary justice, the consequence of choices they'd made. But something beautiful was growing in the neighborhood. The attack had brought people together in ways that years of casual neighboring never had. Block parties became regular events. The community center started offering free classes in self-defense, first aid, and emergency preparedness. Daniel taught some of them, though he always insisted he was just one teacher among many. Ashley decided to write her college application essay about that night. Not about her father being a hero, but about what she learned watching her community come together afterward. She wrote about Mrs. Washington helping Mr. Chen repair his fence, even though her own house needed work. About teenagers volunteering to mow lawns for elderly neighbors. About how tragedy had revealed the strength that was always there, just waiting for a moment to show itself. She got accepted to 3 universities. She chose the one with the best criminal justice program. She wanted to work with at-risk youth, to catch kids like Brandon before they went down the wrong path. Daniel cried when she told him. Linda pretended not to notice, but she was crying too. A year after the attack, the neighborhood organized a unity festival. They invited surrounding communities, local officials, and anyone who wanted to celebrate diversity and resilience. There was music, food from a dozen different cultures, and kids playing together without a care in the world. Daniel was grilling hamburgers at the community center booth when a thin young man in an ill-fitting suit approached hesitantly. It took Daniel a moment to recognize him. Brandon had lost weight. His hair was shorter. He looked older, more weathered. Prison had changed him. "Mr. Rivers," Brandon said, "I got out last week. Early release for good behavior and completion of the de-radicalization program. I wanted to come by and let you know that I've been doing what you said, making better choices. Every day." "That's good," Daniel said, offering his hand. Brandon shook it, gratitude evident in his eyes. "I'm enrolled in community college. I'm studying social work. I want to help other kids who are angry and lost like I was. Show them there's a better way." He paused. "I know I can never make up for what I did, but I can try to stop others from making the same mistakes." "That's all any of us can do," Daniel said. "Keep trying to be better." Linda appeared beside them with Ashley. "You must be Brandon," she said. Brandon nodded nervously. "Daniel told me you might come by. We have a youth mentorship program starting next month. We could use volunteers who understand what these kids are going through. Interested?" Brandon looked shocked. You'd let me work with kids? After what I did? You'll be supervised, Linda said firmly. And you'll have to pass background checks and training. But yes, everyone deserves a chance to make things right. If Daniel thinks you're serious about changing, that's good enough for me. Ashley stepped forward. I'm going to be helping coordinate the program. So you'd be working with me too. Just so you know, I won't go easy on you just because my dad thinks you deserve a second chance. You'll have to prove it. I will, Brandon promised. I swear I will. Daniel watched them talk, planning the program, discussing how to reach kids before hate groups got to them. It felt right. It felt like something good coming from something terrible. The sun was setting over Riverside Heights, casting golden light across the festival. Children were laughing on the playground. Neighbors from every background were sharing food and stories. Music drifted through the air. It looked like peace. It looked like hope. Daniel thought back to that night a year ago when violence had come to his street. He thought about the choice he'd made to stand up instead of hiding. He thought about all the choices that had led to this moment, the good and the bad, the things he was proud of and the things that still haunted him. Linda slipped her hand into his. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking this is what I fought for, Daniel said quietly. All those years, all those missions, I told myself it was to protect people back home. To protect communities like this, families like ours, and for the first time I actually got to do it. Not across the world from strangers. Right here, for people I know. You did good, Linda said. We all did, Daniel corrected. The Washingtons, Mr. Chen, Mrs. Patterson, you, Ashley, everyone. We all protected each other. That's what makes us strong. Ashley ran up with Tommy Washington and his siblings. Dad, can you help us set up the stage for the talent show? Sure thing, kiddo. As Daniel walked toward the stage with his daughter and the neighborhood kids, he realized something important. His story wasn't really about one night of violence. It was about all the days after. It was about a community choosing to become stronger instead of letting fear tear them apart. It was about people like Brandon choosing to be better. It was about ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply because it was the right thing to do. The violence had lasted one night. The healing would last a lifetime. But Riverside Heights was up for the challenge. They'd proven that already. Daniel helped the kids set up the microphones and speakers, just another neighbor lending a hand. The sun finished setting and the festival lights came on, twinkling like stars. The talent show began with Tommy Washington singing off-key, but with incredible enthusiasm. Everyone cheered anyway. This was home. This was community. This was what mattered. And Daniel Rivers, retired Marine sniper turned neighborhood guardian turned regular guy who just wanted to grill hamburgers and watch his daughter grow up, had never been more proud of where he lived or who he lived beside. The attack was over. The healing was ongoing, and Riverside Heights stood strong, united by the night they faced hatred together and chose love instead. That was the real story. That was what would last.